Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Re-Federalist Report, where we talk about all things constitutional in hopes we can go back towards this idea called federalism, where we have a much less powerful and basically intrusive federal government. I am Brady, also known as the War Hamster. Joining me, as per usual, is my good friend, constitutional mentor, Mr. Constitution, Douglas V. Gibbs.
Thanks for having me as always.
Yes, and this is going to be a fun one today. We are on the 14th episode of our walk through James Madison's notes of the 1787 Philadelphia Convention, where the Constitution of the United States came out of.
We're still in the first few weeks for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah, and folks understand Madison's notes were the best notes taken by anybody there, aside from maybe Jackson, the secretary. He even borrowed some stuff from Jackson's notes. But this is an longer than 4-month convention. Now, the first week or two, they met here. But after that, I mean, it was almost every day of the week, except for, you'll notice we'll skip over July 4th, and they weren't meeting on Sundays. But otherwise, I mean, it was pretty consistent. There you go. And you see they're pretty much there every day except for Sunday and except for July 3rd and 4th. You see those first 2 weeks, they met twice. Or just, people are still coming in. They're still trying to get the template going. But the foundational template is the Virginia plan. This is what they're using to go through.
They'd also take a recess on July 27th and come back on August 6th. So they went home.
Okay, I see that.
The ones who are more close by, I think, went home, and others are probably just shacked up at a hotel.
Or the Powell House. I tell the story about Elizabeth Powell quite a bit. But anyway, so this is important. And understand, we're getting to that point. And I don't know what is on today. I didn't read ahead of time. So this is all, we're going. When I go through these episodes, I'm not studying up ahead of time. I want you guys to know that. But we are coming up upon the time where the realization that there's going to be no fixing of the Articles of Confederation, it's going to be a whole new constitution that is beginning to surface.
Yeah, and we're going to. I do study this ahead of time because I've got a guide to know what we're talking about, and so Doug can do his color commenting on my play-by-play, which is
there you go.
There's a gentleman who's running for governor of California, or maybe running, who watched our episode yesterday. And that was his comment. He goes, it's like a good sportscast, Brady. You're the play-by-play, and Doug comes in with a color commentary. And it's
and I've said that before about it. That's what I love about this.
Yeah. So where we left off last week was on June 15th, and Mr. Patterson, William Patterson, who's from New Jersey, had just presented the New Jersey plan, which is an alternative to the Virginia plan for fixing the Articles of Confederation that was proposed by Mr. Randolph, ostensibly. So we just presented the New Jersey plan. It's interesting that Patterson presented this because the New Jersey plan is a much more favorable to the small states that favored federalism, whereas the Virginia plan favored a little bit more national government. And it's funny that it's Patterson that presents the New Jersey plan because we went through his profile and he ended up being a member of the Federalist Party and a very strong nationalist. In fact, he was one of the authors of one of the worst pieces of legislation that attacked the Constitution, which was the Judiciary Act of 1789. But for him to be the one presenting it's a little ironic. But with no further ado, let's jump into Saturday, June 16th. Oops, that's the wrong one. There we go. Okay. In Committee of the Whole, resolutions proposed by Mr. Patterson and Mr. Randolph. These are going to be compared. First guy to speak is going to be Lansing.
Real quick, John Lansing, New York. This is a guy who is wanting to fix the Articles of Confederation, does not want Constitution. We'll get to him. All right, go ahead.
Well, he's going to make that clear right now.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Mr. Lansing called for the reading of the first resolution of each plan, which he considered as having principles directly in contrast. That of Mr. Patterson, spelling it with 2 T's here. That's not how he spelled his name. It was only 1 T. Mr. Patterson says he sustains the sovereignty of the respecting states, and that of Mr. Randolph destroys it. It's a pretty big contrast.
It's not like the Virginia plan.
Yeah, the latter, meaning the Virginia Plan, requires a negative on all laws of the particular states. The former, only certain general powers for the general good. So right now, you can, I mean, it's really drawing a contrast.
And that negative on the all laws of particular states, when I mention to people, James Madison supported that when he went in, people were shocked when they hear that.
The plan of Mr. Randolph, the Virginia Plan, in short, absorbs all power except what may be exercised in the little local matters of the states, which are not objects worthy of the supreme cognizance. Basically, the federal government's supreme on everything. That's what
he's describing for more or less a national government.
Yes. Which is what we're living under today, but that's not what was ratified.
Right.
And that's a whole nother conversation, but which we've been having. He grounded his preference in Mr. Patterson's plan chiefly on two objections against that of the Virginia Plan. One, the want of power in the convention to discuss and propose it. He's saying we don't even have the authority to even propose or discuss what you proposed from Virginia. And he says also the improbability of it being adopted. Well, even if we pass this, the people aren't going to accept that. So, and he's going to go into this in more detail. He's decidedly of the opinion that the power of the convention was restrained to amendments of a federal nature and having for their basis the Confederacy in being.
In other words, he's looking at this convention as being what today we would look at as being the Article 5 convention. The Articles of Confederation was the law of the land, and it required a unanimous agreement to amend it, and that he saw this convention as only being for the purpose of amending that document to propose amendments, and that then the states would all have to agree to it. Otherwise, everything they do in there is unlawful. That's his attitude.
And he's calling it a runaway convention.
Yeah.
He says the acts of Congress, the tenor of the acts of the states, the commissions produced by the several deputations all prove this. And this limitation of the power to an amendment of the Confederacy marked the opinion of the states that it was unnecessary and improper to go further. Remember, this guy's from New York. And
New York has a very strong, what would become anti-federalist
faction
environment.
Yeah, and Lansing and Yates would leave the convention.
Because that's what I was mentioning earlier, but didn't necessarily say it. But yeah, ultimately, when they realize that there's a new constitution to be written, they're out of there. And Hamilton leaves with them, but he comes back later.
He was sure that this was the case with his state. New York would never have concurred in sending deputies to the convention if she had supposed that deliberations were to turn on a consolidation of the states and a national government. So he's basically foreshadowing what he's going to do. And his other problem was, would this even be adopted? Was it probable that the states would adopt and ratify a scheme which they had never authorized us to propose, and which so far exceeded what they regarded as sufficient?
Now stop there for a second, because he's actually in error, which they never authorized us to propose. The states voted on and sent those delegates. They knew this was coming. Rhode Island had actually sent delegates, but they never arrived. They went back because they realized this is probably not going to go the way we want. It's a new constitution. We're not even going to participate. It was understood that there was going to be a convention, but here's his complaint. It was under the guise of fixing the Articles of Confederation. Remember, they had the Annapolis Convention in August of 1786, and they had made this decision. They had put it out there. Hey, we need delegates in the states, be it the people or the legislatures they chose delegates to go. They knew this was going to go on, I'm a firm believer that most of them knew there was going to be a new constitution. They knew there was no fixing the articles. They knew that this was the direction they were going to go. Go ahead.
Well, wasn't there only 5 states that made it to the Annapolis Convention?
Yes.
Yeah, and then
but a lot of it was just simply because they couldn't send delegates, but word went out exactly on what happened to all the states.
Yeah, the other caveat to what Doug just said, each of the state legislatures, when they sent their delegation, had given them different marching orders. And some of them, said, yeah, go do whatever the heck it takes. And others say, all right, we're going to put brakes on what you're allowed to discuss. And New York was one of those. And that's where he's coming from on that. Although they all knew they were there to amend the Articles of Confederation, some were given more leeway than others.
And of course, Hamilton didn't care what the New York legislature said, but that's beside the point.
Hamilton didn't care what a lot of people said, including himself. But I'm not going to bash on Hamilton today because I'm going to have plenty of time to do that soon.
When he returns after Lansing and Robert Yates leave. So you got it.
Actually, no, I'll start bashing on him on our very next episode because we haven't heard from him yet. But that's a little bit of foreshadow of what next week will be.
Okay, very good.
We see by their several acts, particularly in relation to the plan of revenue proposed by Congress in 1783, not authorized by the Articles of Confederation, what were the ideas that they entertained? Can so great a change be supposed to have already taken place? Now, what he's referring to is the revenue proposal of 1783. And I just want to go over that real quick because it's important. Basically, they're fighting a war and Congress is broke. We can't pay our soldiers. And so they established a plan to establish a system of federal taxation, which they had no power to do, in order to fund the national government, etc.
Using fiat paper money.
Yeah, well, some way, or what have you. I mean, the continental dollar had already been, created, and of course, there's counterfeits all over the place. The states had their own currencies; they're getting counterfeited. One of the big British plots was to send a bunch of counterfeit colonials into the Union territories to basically destroy their economy. That got foiled by the Culper gang, which was on Washington spies, which when I went over on another show last week. It's a really important part of history, but I've done that in detail with the Colonel. So what they proposed was the revenue plan was a 5% import duty on all goods, additional specific duties on things like sugar, molasses, tea, and wine, collection mechanism. So duties would be collected at ports by federal officers, but with state cooperation, a time limit. It would expire after 25 years or once the debts were paid, and then required state ratification, unanimous consent of all 13 states. Well, it fails because 12 of the 13 eventually agreed to it. Which state do you think refused?
Rhode Island.
Every single damn time. Yeah, Rhode Island refused. They were worried about concerns over national overreach and loss of state sovereignty, which is exactly what they're talking
Rhode
about.
Island has its hands in all kinds of international, what today we would consider criminalities.
Smuggling.
Yeah, that's the word. Piracy and Rhode Island went hand in hand. And they got to remember also, they were the central hub for the import of slaves.
Yeah, they were pirates. They were opposed to federal control. They didn't want any government that could basically interfere with their piracy. There's suspicion of, here we go, a standing revenue stream for a central government. They thought that was bad. And they were right. So that is the revenue proposal of 1783. And that's just basically what he's saying. He goes, look, you tried to do something that was outside the Articles of Confederation. The states were kind of ticked off about it. Eventually they passed it out of necessity, but it wasn't popular.
Yeah, and remember that the Articles of Confederation was hastily written during wartime. And now, when I say hastily, I don't mean in a day. I mean, it took them years, actually, a year. They began writing it right after the Declaration of Independence, and it was then, for the most part, finished by 1777. And then it took even longer to ratify it for a number of reasons. Some of it had to do with the Northwest Territory, but they didn't really originally plan to write something like that. You got to understand that it was done under pressure from France. France is like, you know what? We want to help you, but we don't think you're serious about this union. We don't think you're serious enough. You have not created anything, any government or anything for the Union. For the way we're looking at it, you're just a bunch of petulant individual states, colonies, whatever, former colonies. We don't think you're serious. We're not going to give you help unless you show us that you're serious about this Union thing. So they didn't even plan to write the Articles of Confederation. They wrote it near wartime to appease France so that France would help. Ultimately, that's what it was. And now suddenly, it's the best thing that ever. No, it's very flawed. That was the whole purpose of this convention. But you've got those who are fearful of a central system. They're fearful of the states losing their sovereignty, and I get that. I am in no way arguing against that. But
you're in the middle of
fearful. They're not willing to create what is necessary for the Union.
You're in the middle of a war against the most powerful government on the planet, trying to get away from this government authority. So you're not going to. What's the point of fighting the war if you're just going to replace it with the tyranny at home? Right.
Replace the monarchy with a bureaucracy that's overpowering. Well, wait a second.
And just coincidentally, talking about the French, Rochambeau just landed in Newport, Rhode Island, right when this big revenue problem of the army had hit. And all the Congress is back in Philadelphia, doing whatever Congress does while the soldiers are out there bleeding on the front lines. And there's a problem. Congress is not funding the army. Okay, so to rely on any change which is hereafter to take place in the sentiments of the people would be trusting of too great an uncertainty. We know only that their present sentiments are, what their present sentiments are. And it is in vain to propose what will not accord with these. You're wasting your time. You won't get it passed.
It doesn't matter what we do here. The states, the people, they're going to laugh it off. So why even put something out that is not even going to be approved?
The states will never feel a sufficient confidence in a general government to give it a negative on their laws.
That's a big one. State sovereignty, once again.
Yeah, because they were in the Declaration of Independence. They are independent sovereign states.
And understand something. This is something that's never really been seen before, except in one place, Israel. Israel had 12 tribes. The tribes were independent, yet they were a union. That's the only time in history you'd ever seen anything close to what they're creating here. But they had developed individually as their own colonies. This idea of state sovereignty was embedded. It wasn't just some idea that came up. This is something that had been embedded and grew through colonial existence going back over 100 years.
Interesting you'd say that. This scheme itself is totally novel. There is no parallel for it to be found. The authority of Congress is familiar to the people, and an augmentation of the powers of Congress will be readily approved by them.
Interesting. I said that.
Yeah.
But there you go.
That's why I was laughing. What he's saying there is important because he says, look, we can give Congress a little bit more authority and maybe stop some of the problems that we've seen with the Articles of Confederation. But we can expand upon Congress, but you're trying to create a whole new executive department. It's going to become tyrannical. Now, of course, he's correct, as history would show us. But
well, and the founders, you got to realize, are between a rock and a hard place. You have too weak of a government, and you're not going to last. And the empires of the world are going to pick you apart quicker than a predator going through the bones of its prey.
Very much so.
But at the same time, you create too big of a government, then you wind up just like the rest of those empires with tyranny and so on. So. And so we're still searching for that happy balance. And Lansing is onto something. He's essentially right, but he's not willing to bend even a little bit. And the idea that ultimately happens is we can have a bigger government without it being out of control. We can have the lion rather than a lamb as long as we cage it. The problem is, will the cage be respected? Will the cage be followed? Ultimately, that is the question. And Lansing's saying, no, that cage is not going to work. And you're going to have a lion on the loose, and you're going to wind up with tyranny.
Not only that, but the people aren't even going to let you build your cage in the first place. So, all right. So here's Patterson defending the New Jersey plan. Mr. Patterson said, as he had on a former occasion given his sentiments on the plan produced by Mr. R., he would now avoiding repetition as much as possible, give his reasons
Mr. R being Mr. Randolph, by the way, folks.
Yes. In favor of that proposed by himself. He preferred it because it accorded, 1, with the powers of the convention, 2, with the sentiments of the people. Pretty much what Lansing had said. Think those guys had talked the night before?
One wonders which pub. All right, go ahead.
If the Confederacy was radically wrong, let us return to our states and obtain larger powers, not assume them of ourselves. Speaking of the convention. I came here not to speak my own sentiments, but the sentiments of those who sent me. This is what my people want. Our object,
this thing called representation, we seem to have lost it nowadays. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, now you just represent a national party. You don't care about your local constituents. Our object is not such a government as may be best in itself, but such a one as our constituents have authorized us to prepare, and as they will approve. If we argue the matter on the supposition that no confederacy at present exists, it cannot be denied that all the states stand on the footing of equal sovereignty. Okay, that makes perfect sense. All therefore must concur before any can be bound. This goes back to the unanimity to change the article.
All must concur. You hear what he's saying, Rhode Island? Oh, wait, they're not there.
If a proportional representation be right, why do we not vote so here? If we argue on the fact that a federally compact actually exists and consult the articles of it, we will still find an equal sovereignty to be the basis of it. That's really kind of the core argument they settled early on, protecting equal representation or population based.
And you see the word federal used a number of times, even when referring to the Articles of Confederation. Confederation is a type of system in which the members are in a union, but they hold almost all the power individually. And sometimes they would refer to it as a federal system or a federal compact because it was a confederation or federation of states. But the true federal type system that was going to come was yet to be created. So while they were using the word federal, and maybe it is a little bit of a short foreshadowing of what would be created, they did often refer to the Confederacy as a federal compact or a federal system.
Yeah, and the key word there is the compact, because when we're debating the Constitution today, one of the theories is that it was the compact theory of the Constitution. It means it was a contract. And if you can accede to a contract, you can secede from it. The Lincolnians have a completely different theory, which is totally wrong, but we'll just save that for another day.
Yeah, and when you think compact or contract, folks, you think then there's got to be parties to that contract. And the parties here are the states, and their representatives in the meeting creating that contract are these delegates. But ultimately, it is the states themselves, not the delegates, that will approve whether or not the parties will be a part of that contract. And it is a voluntary membership. And like any contract, if a party to a contract feels that it has been breached, the contract has been breached, they can remove themselves from that contract because of that breach. That's what secession was and is.
It was legal and is legal.
Mm-hmm.
He reads the 5th article of the Articles of Confederation, giving each state a vote, and the 13th declaring that no alteration shall be made without unanimous consent. Real quick, I'm just going to pull up the Articles of Confederation. And here we have it. So this is Article 5. For the more convenient management of the general interests of the United States, delegates shall be annually appointed, etc. No state shall be represented in Congress by less than 2. Each state shall maintain its own delegates, etc., etc. The 13th is the big one here. Scroll down. Every state shall abide by the determinations of the United States in Congress assembled. Union shall be perpetual. That we got rid of that one. Nor any alteration at any time hereafter may be made in them unless such alteration be agreed to in Congress and afterwards confirmed by the legislatures of every state. That's what he's referring to.
And notice that the term United States is not capitalized. United States back then could be used in one of two different ways. United States, capital U, capital S. That's the name of the country. That's the name of the union, the country itself. But they also saw united as an adjective. And often when they refer to the United States, they were referring to these states that are united because the sovereignty of the states was so important. They were in a union, but they were United States, adjective, lowercase, and that's what you were seeing in the articles.
This next couple sentences are important. It says, this is the nature of all treaties. What is unanimously done must be unanimously undone. It was observed by Mr. Wilson that the larger states gave up the point, not because it was right, but because the circumstances of the moment urged the concession. That was the right of equal representation, being one vote per state.
Right.
Be it so. Are they for that reason at liberty to take it back? Since we're bigger, now can we just take back the power that we've already agreed to? Which is basically what Virginia proposed with the Virginia plan, because they wanted it to be legislature to be population based, and they were the biggest state. Can they take it back? And the answer is no, they couldn't. The small states never would have agreed. Can the donor resume his gift without the consent of the donee? This doctrine may be convenient, but it is a doctrine that will sacrifice the lesser states. New Jersey being one of the smaller states. The large states acceded readily to the Confederacy. It was the small ones that came in reluctantly and slowly. New Jersey and Maryland were the two last, the former objecting to the want of power in Congress over trade. Both of them to the want of power to appropriate the vacant territory to the benefit of the whole. So they're basically saying we weren't going to join the Articles of Confederation because there were some flaws in it that gave the government too much power, and now you're trying to give it more power again.
Yeah, real quick, what they're referring to was not just the government having too much power or the states with the large populations having more control. They feared by looking at Virginia, that Virginia might expand all the way to the other coast someday. The Northwest Territory, much of that territory belonged to states like Virginia and Pennsylvania, and they would just continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger and swallow up the smaller states. And so the Northwest Territory was actually, that's where the agreement came from. If we're going to have this Articles of Confederation, we're not signing on unless it is promised and we take action. That property is not going to belong to the bigger states. It will be territory later organized for other states, and that's ultimately what happened. And so then they still have this fear, the bigger states are going to swallow them up. And I want to decode this a little bit. It's a fear of democracy. See, when you have democracy, it is what? The majority rule. Well, the majority was Pennsylvania and Virginia, and they didn't like that at all. When you have democracy, the large population centers control everything. And they're saying, we don't want democracy. We want a system where the rural areas have a voice as well, that the majority doesn't rule, that the different parts of the country rule together, and that there's even voice, and one cannot swallow up or dominate over the other. And what we'll see eventually is this will develop into the way our U.S. Senate would become, but we'll get to that. Anyway, continue, sir.
Yeah, the whole purpose of a republic is to protect the minority from the majority, which is the opposite of what Democrats keep claiming. If the sovereignty of the states is to be maintained, the representatives must be drawn immediately from the states, not from the people, and we have no power to vary the idea of equal sovereignty. The only expedient that will cure the states, not from the people, and we have no power, I've just repeated myself. The only expedient that will cure the difficulty is that of throwing the states into hotchpot. All right. What the heck is a hotchpot? Yeah, I had to look it up, Doug.
Okay. I'm curious too. I'm not familiar with that word, even though I've read it before.
So we're going to our favorite Webster's Dictionary of 1828.
You already brought it up now, but I was going to say, it's It's a because I've heard the term where just throwing everything together. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, it's properly, it's a mingled mass, a mixture of ingredients. In law, number 2, a mixing of lands. Thus, lands given in frank marriage to one daughter shall, after the death of the ancestor, be blended with the lands descending to her, and then be divided in equal portions to all the daughters. So pretty much what Doug said, but it was a legal term, not just colonial slang. And he's saying the only expedient that will cure the difficulty is that of throwing the states into a hotchpot, which we don't want to do because our states.
I have heard that word now and think about it quite a bit before, but we just don't use it very often, so we don't think about it. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I read it. I had to look it up because, well, now you see why. Yeah. To say that this is impracticable will not make it so. Let it be tried, and we shall see whether the citizens of Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Virginia accede to it. It will be objected that coercion will be impracticable. But will it be more so in one plan than the other?
Now, remember, Massachusetts does not only have a larger population, but they still have the territory that today we know as Maine. So they're actually geographically a relatively large state. That's why Massachusetts was thrown in with Pennsylvania and Virginia there. So the question is this: are the larger states geographically, not just population, but geographic, willing to mix it up and spread it out evenly? Now, remember, there's also an understanding of the danger of collectivism, utopianism, and this kind of hedges towards that. And so you're going to hear of, I believe we're going to hear some voices saying, "Whoa, wait a second! Now you're going too far the other way." Anyway, go ahead.
Its efficacy will depend on the quantum of power collected, not on its being drawn from the states or from the individuals. And according to his plan, meaning the New Jersey plan, it may be exerted on individuals as well as according that of Mr. R. Again, a distinct executive and a judiciary also were equally provided by his plan. It is urged that 2 branches in the legislature are necessary. Why? For the purpose of a check.
Now, real quick, but if they're going to check each other, they can't be carbon copies of each other. They must be different. Continue.
Yes. Otherwise, it would be redundant, which is what we have today. But the reason of the precaution is not applicable to this case. Within a particular state where party heats prevail, such a check may be necessary. In such a body as Congress, it is less necessary, and besides, the delegations of the different states are checks on each other. He makes a couple points there. Look, we got local corruption. We've dealt with this, and we need the way we check it is with different types of representation. But nationally, Congress is different, and because each representative will represent their state and not some national political party, that's how we check each other. We've got so many different parties with different interests. No one party will ever, become a majority and be able to dominate the others. That's what he's saying.
And as James Madison explains in Federalist 10, factions aren't just parties. Factions aren't just industries. Factions also can be type of populations. And what we're really talking about here ultimately is the cities, the population centers versus the rural areas where the population is not as great. And we also want to make sure that the minority voice there, the rural areas, also has a voice.
It gets interesting here. Do the people at large complain of Congress? No. What they wish is that Congress may have more power. If the power now proposed be not enough, the people hereafter will make additions to it. So if we give Congress a little bit more power now, and it's still not enough, we can just give Congress a little more power until we find the proper medium.
It's worked out so well that now Congress has a what is it, like 14% approval rating, or it's lower than that now. I think it's down to like 7%. But anyway, go ahead.
With proper powers, Congress will act with more energy and wisdom than the proposed national legislature.
So in other words, let's hang on to our Continental Congress. Let's not create what you want to create.
Being fewer in number and more secreted and refined by the mode of election. Meaning appointed by your legislature of your state.
Yeah, rather than voted in. Remember, democracy. They feared democracy, and as Winston Churchill once said, the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. These guys recognized the average person was not informed, but you want the voice of the people, but yet you want to check that. How are we going to do that? Let's continue.
The plan of Mr. Randolph will also be enormously expensive. Here's a fun point. Allowing Georgia and Delaware 2 representatives each in the popular branch of the aggregate number of the branch will be 180. Add to that half as many for the other branch, and you have 270 members, coming once at least a year for the most distant as well as the most central parts of the Republic. In the present deranged state of our finances, I love that terminology, can so expensive a system be seriously thought of? By enlarging the powers of Congress, the greatest part of the expense will be saved, and all purposes will be answered. At least a trial ought to be made. You're saying it's too darn expensive to have that many Congress critters. We can't afford it. They got to travel, once a year at least, and that's their biggest expense. How things have changed. The last thing he's saying is we got to at least try my way. Before we completely abolish, let's try to incrementally.
Now, here's the great thing about this is you've got voices from all sides. They're not calling each other racist or bigot or anything like that. You're intolerant. If you don't agree with me, they are battling back and forth. They're putting out their ideas. And as we watch this and we see the different ideas, well, you're kind of right. You're kind of right. What can we do to make it where we get a little bit of everything? Mr. Wilson has something to say.
Oh, he does. This is James
Wilson, folks, from Pennsylvania.
He of the favorite state house yard speech. Mr. Wilson entered into a contrast of the principal points of the 2 plans so far as he said there had been time to examine the last one proposed, which just happened the day before. He says, here's the differences, big picture. These points are: 1, in the Virginia plan, there are 2, and some degree 3 branches in the legislature. In the plan from New Jersey, there is to be a single legislature only. Next point. Representation of the people at large is the basis of one, the state legislatures, the pillars of the other. Democracy versus appointments by the legislature. Another contrast, number 3. Proportional representation prevails in one, equality of suffrage in the other. Population-based versus 1 per state. A people of the U.S. A single executive magistrate is at the head of the one. A plurality is held out in the other. 5. In the one, the majority of the people of the U.S. must prevail. In the other, a minority may prevail. Number 6, the national legislature is to make laws in all cases to which the separate states are incompetent, and in place of this Congress are to have additional power in only a few cases. Has to do with how much state sovereignty is maintained. Number 7, a negative on the laws of the states. In place of this coercion to be substituted.
Coercion.
Yes. Number 8, the executive to be removable on impeachment and conviction in one plan, and the other to be removable at the instance of the majority of the executives of the states. 2 different ways to eliminate a bad president.
And as you're listening to this, folks, how many of them are you going, hey, that and that became what we have? So we're going. He's laying out what's been proposed, and when he lays them out, you're going. You're able to see it better and go, okay, why can't we have both of those? That works. That doesn't, and that's why he's doing this. Continue.
Yeah, it's not an either or Virginia plan or New Jersey plan. He's just
laying it out.
There's some good points. There's some good points in each, and let's see how they blend. So I think this is one of Wilson's most important speeches. 9. Revision of the laws provided for one, no such check in the other. 10. Inferior national tribunals in one, none such in the other. Talking about courts.
Mm-hmm. And I've told my classes before, there were those who argued against having a federal judiciary in the first place.
Yeah. In ye one jurisdiction of national tribunals to extend, and I'm not quite sure what that sentence means. In the other, an appellate jurisdiction only allowed in the other. National tribunals meaning a federal judiciary. 12. Here the jurisdiction is to extend to all cases affecting the national peace and harmony. There, a few cases only are marked out. Enumeration doctrine. Either we give Congress power over everything, or we give them limited powers. That's an important one. Finally, ye ratification is in this to be by the people themselves, or is in that by the legislative authorities, according to the 13 articles of the Articles of Confederation. So,
and many of these, once again, you get a little bit of both. You know, for example, that last one, when it comes to amendments, the state legislatures or by convention, it can be done either way. All right, continue.
All right. With regard to the power of this convention, he conceived himself authorized to conclude nothing, but to be at liberty to propose anything. In this particular, he felt himself perfectly indifferent to the two plans. That's well said.
Mm-hmm. Both have their good and their bad, their pros and their cons.
But
and
right there,
why can't we look at both of them and be indifferent to both of them?
But he's also addressing the question of whether they even had the authority to propose some of this stuff. And he's saying, yeah, I'm at liberty to talk about it and propose it. I can't necessarily conclude anything right now, but we can still talk about it. We're not handcuffed. With regard to the sentiments of the people, he conceived it difficult to know precisely what they are. I don't know what everyone in America is thinking. Those of the particular circle in which one moved were commonly mistaken for the general voice. Talking about bubbles, which is one of the big problems we face today. Giant information bubble.
Squeaky wheel gets the grease, and then we assume all four wheels are squeaky.
Now I'm talking about the information bubble. So you can talk to some very, very normal someone. Let's say someone from the left, and I mean they could have basically be a good person, but because they have totally different sets of information, they will draw a 100% different conclusion to somebody who has the same morals and values as them. And that's the same thing. Is we don't know because we don't talk to people because we can't. He could not persuade himself that the state governments and sovereignties were so much the idols of the people, nor a national government so obnoxious to them as some supposed. It means you're drawing conclusions that may not be backed by the majority of the population. Why should a national government be unpopular? Has it less dignity? Will each citizen enjoy under it less liberty or protection? Well, yeah.
Well, he's speaking rhetorically at this point.
Yeah, but actually, I think he's saying that wouldn't make a difference because we're good people. We're going to have good legislators. Whereas I think history has shown us that power will always corrupt. Will a citizen of Delaware be degraded by becoming a citizen of the United States? Where do the people look at present for relief from the evils of which they complain? I want to address that. Yes, you would be degraded by becoming a citizen of the United States. You're in small state Delaware. You have a voice. You can get things done. You can talk to your representatives. Now we have two national parties. Your voice doesn't matter. It is degraded. That's why we keep things local and decentralized. He's denying that. Now, granted, the colonies were much smaller back then, or this nation was, but still. Is it from an internal reform of their governments? No, sir. It is from the national councils that relief is expected. For these reasons, he did not fear that the people would not follow us into a national government, and it will be a further recommendation of Mr. Randolph's plan that is to be submitted to them and not to the legislatures for ratification. He's making the argument for the national government. Proceeding now to the first point on which he had contrasted the two plans, he observed that anxious as he was for some augmentation of the federal powers, it would be with extreme reluctance indeed that he could ever consent to give powers to Congress. He had two reasons, either of which was sufficient. This is important. One, Congress as a legislative body does not stand on the people. It is a single body. One, he would not repeat the remarks he had formerly made on the principles of representation. He would only say that an inequality in it has ever been a poison contaminating every branch of government. I was going to talk about England. In Great Britain, where this poison has had a full operation, the security of private rights is owing entirely to the purity of her tribunals of justice, the judges of which are neither appointed nor paid by a venal parliament. It's a pretty strong point, and I get where he's coming from. But again, he's overly reliant upon the good nature and moral character of the political body, or the people who make it up. The political liberty of that nation, owing to the inequality of representation, is at the mercy of its rulers. He means not to insinuate that there is any parallel between the situation of that country and ours at present, but it is a lesson we ought not to disregard, that the smallest bodies in Great Britain are notoriously the most corrupt. It's an interesting conclusion.
It's funny because how many times have you heard me, talk about when they talk about representation and the size of Congress, the number of people that are represented by each person, and people have argued, well, part of the problem is that our legislators represent too many people, so the solution in the minds of some people has been to reduce the size of the district so that the person doesn't represent as many. And then I usually respond, well, if representing less makes someone less corrupt and more in tune with the people, how do you explain city councils? If anything, they're worse. And that's the note that he's taking, that he's giving us here.
Now, that's interesting is this is the same argument they used to ratify the 17th Amendment. They said, look, your state legislatures are so corrupt, you're giving us corrupt U.S. senators. So what we need to do is nationalize the corruption. and how's that worked out?
Yeah.
Well, I'd rather keep my corruption small than large.
And of course, that was just an excuse to get the states out of it. The corruption wasn't at the level that they were claiming, but that's a different discussion for a different time.
Bottom line is this corruption in all politics. Power corrupts.
Well, and as you've heard me tell my audiences, what is political office? It is a position of power. So who is it going to attract? People seeking power. Then we complain that we got a bunch of people in office who just want power. That's what it attracts. And then we say, well, the good guys aren't running. They don't want power. So it almost goes against us. And that's why it's important for us to have people who don't seek power. They want to do the right thing to seek office. Even though they don't want the power, we need them there because we've got to we've got to give a counterweight to those who seek power. And that this is just something that we have to do as people who love liberty. And there are candidates out there, and you made a sort of reference to one for governor who is also behind shows that we do on Wednesdays and Thursdays, Leo Zaki. Not that I want to make this a campaign episode, but there are those out there that are not seeking power. They're seeking to do the right thing. We have to be smart enough. We have to be in tune enough. We have to have the proper what's the right word?
Discernment.
Discernment. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. In fact, boy, you're good. We have to have that discernment to recognize those people. And early on, they're saying, hey, we have that discernment. We're good people. We're going to have good politicians. Right.
Now, unfortunately, and a corollary to what Doug's saying is, now we have a system where you have to need money to get elected. And the people with the money are going to back politicians that are going to use that power to benefit their business interests. Mm-hmm. So unless you're willing to play that bribery game, you're not getting the money. And that's why both of our national political parties are corrupt as all heck.
Yeah, and I talk about this all the time. I don't have problems with political parties. I don't have problem with government. I don't have problem with corporations. My problem is when they start colluding. That's the problem.
We have a term for that. It kind of rhymes with fascism. Every other source of influence must also be stronger in small than large bodies of men. When Lord Chesterfield has told us that one of the Dutch provinces had been seduced into the views of France, he need not have added that it was not Holland, but one of the smallest of them, of the provinces. There are facts among ourselves which are known to all. Passing over others, he will only remark that the impost, so anxiously wished for by the public, was defeated not by any of the larger states in the Union. Congress is a single legislature. Despotism comes on mankind in different shapes, sometimes in an executive, sometimes in a military one. Is there no danger of legislative despotism?
Despotism.
The theory and practice both proclaim it. If the legislative authority be not restrained, there can be neither liberty nor stability. And it can only be restrained by dividing it within itself into distinct and independent branches. In a single house, there is no check, but the inadequate one of, God dang, can I buy a vowel today? The virtue of good sense of those who compose it.
Let's examine real quick a word that he was using and a word that we actually see a lot of. Despotism. What is despotism? What is a despot? Despotism is the exercise of absolute power, absolute control, centralization of power. And historically, despotism, once that absolute power is reached, becomes cruel and oppressive. This is what they fought a revolution against. And there's a fear that they may move in that direction. Remember, though, America is a developing country in a world of empires run by despots. Despotism, a form of the government in which those entities, those monarchs or the people around them, with them, be it the state religion, be it the judges, be it the legislatures, rule with absolute power, and the people only have an illusion of say. And this is what they're fearing. We live in a world like this. We need to be different. We need to make sure that despotism doesn't invade, doesn't infiltrate what we're doing. And if we give the government too much power, despotism is inevitable. This is the attitude by many of them.
Yeah, they just have a bunch of different definitions of how, or plans of how to keep that from happening. But it is a point three. They're unanimous about, well, almost unanimous. Mr. Wilson continues, on another great point, the contrast was equally favorable to the plan reported by the Committee of the Whole, that's the Virginia plan. It vested the executive powers in a single magistrate. The plan of New Jersey vested them in a plurality. In order to control the legislative authority, you must divide it. In order to control the executive, you must unite it. I actually like that point.
And it's exactly right, you know, and you know, just because something works well with one doesn't mean it's going to work well with the other. There are different types of systems in your system.
Yeah, one requires debate and compromise, and the other requires decisive action.
And sometimes committees are not what you need. Sometimes you need a decisive action. Sometimes what you need is committee. It depends on what it is. To execute the laws, it needs to be decisive. Or as a friend of mine likes to say, for God so loved the world, he didn't send a committee. So there you go.
One man will be more responsible than three. Three will contend among themselves till one becomes the master of his colleagues. This is going back to the proposal to have 3 executives or more than one. Instead of one president, 3 people will split powers. In the triumvirates, he's going into history now, of Rome, first Caesar, then Augustus, are witnesses of this truth. The kings of Sparta and the consuls of Rome prove also the factious consequences of dividing the executive magistracy.
In the case of the Roman Senate, there were 2 consuls. Before that, when Rome was a kingdom, it was 10 kings. And while the Republican part of the system worked well, there was often misdirection or lack of direction because of the multiple consuls, which would be their version of executive. Of course, as with the parliamentary system, the executives were also a part of the legislature. We'll get into that separation of powers, though, down the road. Go ahead.
Having already taken up so much time, he would not, he said, proceed to any of the other points. Those on which he had dwelt are sufficient of themselves, and on a decision of them, the fate of the others will depend. That's a good point.
Yeah, can't do the others till we get this taken care of.
Yeah, let's get the big outline done, and then we can fill in the blanks. Next up is Mr. Pinckney from South Carolina, small state. The whole comes to this, as he conceived. Give New Jersey an equal vote, and she will dismiss her scruples and concur in the national system. He thought the convention authorized to go to any length in recommending which they found necessary to remedy the evils which produced this convention. That's a little bit of a snide remark at New Jersey. Because they were basically saying, well, we don't really have the authority. He's saying, look, we got a problem. It needs to be fixed. So let's get on with it.
Authority or not, we got a problem. It needs to be fixed.
Yeah, because otherwise it's going to be chaos, and this experiment will fail. Next to speak is Mr. Ellsworth, and that is Oliver Ellsworth from Connecticut. He proposed, as a more distinctive form of collecting the mind of the committee on the subject, that the legislative power of the U.S. should remain in Congress. This was not seconded, though it seemed better calculated for the purpose than the first proposition of Mr. Patterson, in place of which Mr. Ellsworth wished to substitute it. That's Madison ad-libbing. Of course, he was capable of seconding it himself and did not do so. So it's interesting. All right, Mr. Randolph will close the day. He was not scrupulous on the point of power. When the salvation of the Republic was at stake, it would be reason to our trust not to propose what we found necessary. I'm sorry, it would be treason to our trust. So our Republic's at stake. If we do not talk about, discuss, propose, debate what we think are the solutions, we'll be committing treason to the trust that our states empowered us with.
The sin of omission.
He painted in strong colors the imbecility of the existing Confederacy.
Now, remember, folks, Mr. Randolph, State of Virginia, presented the Virginia Plan written by James Madison, who's writing these notes. Keep that in mind.
The imbecility of the existing Confederacy. One of the best. There's so many great quotes in here, but that's going to be in the top 10. And the danger of delaying a substantial reform. In answer to the objection drawn from the sense of our constituents, as denoted by their acts relating to the convention and the objects of their deliberation, he observed that as each state acted separately in this case, it would have been indecent for it to have been charged for it to have charged the existing constitution with all the vices which it might have perceived in it. The first state that set on foot this experiment would not have been justified in going so far, ignorant as it was of the opinion of others, and sensible as it must have been of the uncertainty of the successful issue to the experiment. There are certainly seasons of a peculiar.
Certainly seasons, and this is biblical,
Mm-hmm.
right? Remember in the Bible, there's a season for. All right, go ahead.
There are certainly seasons of a peculiar nature where the ordinary cautions must be dispensed with, and this is certainly one of them. He would not, as far as depended on him, leave anything that seemed necessary undone. And we are here to do stuff. The present moment is favorable and is probably the last that we'll offer. Do or die time. The true question is whether we shall adhere to the federal plan or introduce the national plan. That's it right there. The insufficiency.
And notice the contrast here. Either it's Articles of Confederacy or some national system. They haven't figured out they're going to have something in between yet. Right now, we have this great contrast.
Well, we've only had two plans proposed, and they are being balanced right now.
Well, we've had more than that plans proposed, but there's only two being seriously considered. Yes.
The insufficiency of the former has been fully displayed by the trial already made. We already tried the Articles of Confederation.
It ain't working.
Yeah. There are but two modes by which the end of a general government can be attained. The first is by coercion, as proposed by Mr. Patterson's plan, or two, by real legislation as proposed by the other plan. Coercion he pronounced to be impracticable, expensive, cruel to individuals. It tended also to habituate the instruments of it to shed the blood and riot in the spoils of their fellow citizens, and consequently train them up for the service of ambition. It's a pretty harsh denunciation.
Mm-hmm.
We must resort, therefore, to a national legislation over individuals for which Congress are unfit. To vest such power in them would be blending the legislative with the executive, contrary to the recommended maxim on the subject. If the union of those powers heretofore in Congress has been safe, it has been owing to the general impotency of that body. Congress are moreover not elected by the people, but by legislatures who retain even a power of recall. They have therefore no will of their own. They are merely a diplomatic body and are always obsequious to the views of the states, who are always encroaching on the authority of the United States. Saying is, if you keep going with only congressmen that are appointed by the legislatures, it is the legislatures, it's the states themselves that retain the power, and not independent. Congressmen won't have the ability to vote independently. He's also making an argument
because they'll be worried about whether or not they'll get yanked by that legislature.
Exactly. And he's saying states will always try to encroach on the United States because the United States does not have any power to push back.
And understand, while they fear democracy, the people need to have a voice, but they're not addressing it as much, although they have. Remember, one of the plans is by population and voted in. So go ahead.
And these are really long-winded speeches, and I know it makes it sometimes people watching saying, okay, get to the point. It's important we go through every bit of this, because I really remember we're trying to discern the original intent of the founders and how they came to the conclusions that they did.
And I think this last sentence, this paragraph, really ties it up nicely.
A provision for harmony among the states, as in trade, naturalization, and for crushing rebellion.
This is what we need a central government for, is for these external issues and the issues that directly relate to the Union, like rebellion. The Shays Rebellion is what they're talking about here.
I like the fact that he included naturalization, international affairs, and that's something that's on the current events. Right now, Donald Trump is sending troops into these cities, to basically, because people are attacking ICE, carrying out its constitutional duties to deport illegal immigrants. Naturalization is clearly in the purview of the federal government.
And these courts that are trying to strike this down, they would have struck down George Washington with the Whiskey Rebellion. That's how bad these courts are. We have precedent. We have examples by the founders.
We do. All right, final paragraph. Whenever it may rear its crest, and for certain other general benefits must be made. Talking about that's a continuation on the rebellion sentence. For crushing rebellion whenever it may rear its crest, and for certain other general benefits must be made. The powers for these purposes can never be given to a body, inadequate as Congress are in point of representation, elected in the mode in which they are, and possessing no more confidence than they do. Congress is inadequate to carry out these duties. For notwithstanding what has been said to the contrary, his own experience satisfied him that a rooted distrust of Congress pretty generally prevailed. Well, that's certainly the case today. A national government alone, properly constituted, will answer the purpose, and he begged it to be considered that the present is the last moment for establishing one. After this select experiment, the people will yield to despair.
Now, understand, we have mentioned quite often what it has become, that tyranny is rising. The system, and it's funny, Winston Churchill has a great quote regarding this. He says, the American system is the worst ever except for all others. And what I'm getting at is, no matter how you designed it, the idea was to guard against human nature the best. But human nature is still human nature. Human nature, the desire for tyranny, the desire for power for certain people, that's still going to be there. You're trying to guard best against that. It will never be perfect. There will always be those infiltrations. And these gentlemen are recognizing that. They're talking about this whole thing is about human nature. We don't trust human nature. We don't trust tyrants. We don't trust those who seek power. We're afraid that if we do this, this could happen. But if we keep this, this happens. This is what's going on. But understand, this is ultimately all about the dangers of human nature and the desire for power and tyranny.
Yeah, 100%. And, it's he talks about the experiment we've been going through. It just ain't working. And Shays' Rebellion was really the last straw. They recognize that the Union is getting ready to shatter. And he's making the plea, we need a national government. We can't just boost Congress up a little bit because people don't trust them. They don't have enough power. They don't act, according for the right motivations. We need a national government, which he assures us will never get out of control.
Well, but then you got the arguments. Well, what about the checks and balances? Checks and balances start coming into the discussion. If you have a legislature that only has this, it'll run away. If you have a power only here, it'll run away. How about if they start checking each other? This is where we're headed.
All right, so that concludes Saturday, June 2nd, June 16th, I mean. Pretty interesting day of commentary. Really important stuff was talked about. They'll take Sunday off, go to church, and come back ready to go on Monday.
Maybe a few of them may have done some praying while they're at it.
Well, the one who's going to be speaking most on Monday, June 18th, when next we meet, is one of my least favorite characters, Alexander Hamilton, will make his first big speech. And you're going to want to watch this because you want to know what Hamilton's all about? Well, he's going to tell you.
And I wonder how much influence that had on John Lancey and Robert Yates going, that's it. We've had enough of this. We're out of here. We'll see.
Well, that was a pretty good show, a pretty good episode. I thought you'd enjoy that. Real quick, Doug, you want to tell everyone where we can find you?
DouglasVGibbs.com. DouglasVGibbs.com. If you're looking for me on social media, videos, whatever, Douglas V. Gibbs typically is the key word, except for when you go to Substack. I just finally put my first Substack out there. Mr. Constitution's the key word there. And of course, as a second site, if you're looking for my whole list of radio shows, my whole list of books, links, all that, you can also go to navigation2liberty.com. That's navigation, the number 2, liberty.com. And of course, if you want to help fund what I do, become a follower, become a subscriber, join the movement at each of those sites, douglasvgibbs.com, hit the join link in the link bar, or if you go to navigation2liberty.com, says join the movement. Either way, you will go to the same page, $9 a month. That's all it takes to help us move forward with the battle for our Constitution and liberty.
Very good. Thank you, Doug. Pleasure having you back. And we'll try to get a
pleasure, sir.
Let's see if we can pick up a couple. See if we can get through 2 episodes next week. Let's see what our schedules do, because we're getting into some really good stuff, and I want to keep the momentum going. But everybody, thanks again for watching. I love the feedback I'm getting in the comments on Rumble. Appreciate you guys watching. I know this is a very long exercise. I think it's worth it. I'm learning more each week, and as I go and research some of the topics. So I hope you're learning as well. Doug, thank you very much. Till next time, everybody. Cheers.